Hey, I'm Dan Harris, host of the 10% Happier podcast. When life gets a little rough, sometimes we feel this overwhelming urge to fix everything, which really is impossible. So I've got a new series coming up called Reset, where we're going to help you find simple, practical, surgical ways to reset key areas of your life. The lineup is incredible. We've got people like Gretchen Rubin, Laurie Santos, Atul Gawande, and The Daily Show's Josh Johnson. 10% Happier with Dan Harris. Join the party wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Secret Passage podcast. I am your host, Dana Vespoli.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're taking a little break from true crime to discuss some other things. I'm sure that if you are online or watch television at all, you are aware of the Ryan Murphy series called Love Story, all about the relationship between JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. It's got a chokehold on the public. I mean, all of us Gen Xers who are watching it are just really heavily nostalgic, thinking about the 1990s, the soundtrack of the show, the wardrobe, the fashion, what's happening in that period of time, all of it. It's caused me to go back and rewatch all of the Sex and the City series just for New York in the 90s. That's all I want is New York City in the 90s. But it's interesting too to see all of some of the Gen Z who are being introduced to John and Carolyn for the first time, and also watching the show and believing that this is how their relationship was. And the writing is terrible. I'm just going to say that. My opinion only. What do I know, right? What do I know? But the writing is pretty bad. But it's a good-looking show. It's a very good-looking show.
It surprises me that the writing's bad because Ryan Murphy is generally pretty good, yeah?
I think he's inconsistent. I mean, he is so prolific. It's hard to, I think, when you're putting out as much as he is all the time, things are going to fall through the cracks a little bit. I mean, keep in mind, this show came out. So did the show, The Beauty. I just finished that, the first season of it. It's like it's constant. And then you've got the new American Horror Stories coming out, all of this all the time. Generally speaking, I enjoy Ryan Murphy, but also keep in mind that this is kind of a biographical thing, which I don't know if he's delved into before. I don't know his entire body of work, but this leans heavily into, it's inspired by the Carolyn Bessette Kennedy biography called Once Upon a Time, which I read. And it's really playing into the mythology around JFK and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. For those of you who have been living under a rock, I'll explain a little bit about who JFK Jr. was. The son, the only son of President John F. Kennedy. I don't want to say the only son. He had a brother, Patrick, that died, 2 days old, who died. But he was the son of a very mythologized president, John F. Kennedy. And one of the things that has just remained in the collective consciousness of Americans, I think even if you don't know who he is, you're familiar with this iconic image of a little 3-year-old boy saluting his father's casket. That is an image that followed him his entire life, and one that he has, it's from a time he has no memory of. And there's something that's so symbolic about the fact that when people bring it up to him, he says, I have no memory of that day. I have no memory of my father, but I've been defined by this image that I have no memory of, and this period of time I have no memory of. It defined him. And that was a lot of pressure. And that was just some of the pressure that just sat on his shoulders his entire life. So the family itself is, I keep saying the word mythologized, but really it's the best definition. The Kennedy family and what they brought, how it was like this intense, like, cultural zeitgeist, having like this prior to JFK. Presidents were just sort of like these kind of serious, kind of stern, very serious kind of old dudes that were
Mm-hmm.
running the country. And then here comes this young, handsome man
Mm-hmm.
with this incredibly stylish, glamorous, classy wife, also young. And they come into the White House. She gives birth to John, little John, during his presidency. And it's this really profound moment. He was hearkening in this idea of hope and change, and was a visionary in this way that the American public just hadn't experienced that before.
I don't know hardly anything about the Kennedys. I just know the myths, which is why I'm glad we're talking about it, or the mythology. So I remember
Right.
as a kid, the framing felt like they were royalty, like they would call it
Yes.
Camelot. Yeah.
Yes. You can thank Jackie Kennedy for that. Jackie Kennedy. A lot of people just think of her as being, well, a lot of people just think of her in the pink Chanel suit and the pillbox hat that splattered in her husband's blood and brain matter. She changed the White House. She brought in like this style and decor and class. A lot of the American women, they looked up to her. They wanted to be like her. I mean, she was truly a first lady.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was really the first time that the public had their imagination captured by a first lady.
Mm-hmm.
But she not only, had redecoration and different things done in the White House, but when her husband died, she is the reason why the Kennedy legacy has withstood. And this idea of Camelot, withstood. She is solely responsible for that. And we'll get into that when we get into Jack Kennedy later. Right now, I kind of want to start at the end
Mm-hmm.
being with JFK Jr., and then we'll work backwards. But
Oh, that's great.
what do you have? What is your memory of JFK Jr.?
Oh gosh.
Like being in the
They-
90s, like
Yeah.
what was your memory? What are your
I just remember him being really handsome. And I remember Carolyn Kennedy. Oh, is it Caroline Bessette Kennedy? Is it Caroline or Carolyn?
So Caroline, this is
Uh-huh.
going to get confusing though.
Yeah.
Caroline is JFK Jr.'s older sister.
Okay.
Carolyn Bessette was his wife. The blonde hair.
Yeah. I remember I wore the same perfume as she did.
Yeah.
And I remember them being like, in my mind, sort of like, not carbon copies, but updated copies of like John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy, like the 90s version. They were like this good looking couple. I think he was having political aspirations. She was super fashionable, and that's all I remember. I don't know. I it's funny. I was reflecting on this because as we were preparing for this episode, I don't really get captured by a celebrity. I don't really find celebrities or wealthy people all that interesting. I'd rather hear like about Winston Churchill or something, so it's great to be able to do a deep dive into this because like you said earlier, I think that they capture the American psyche. And the fact that John F. Kennedy's presidency sort of overlapped with Marilyn Monroe, the Vietnam War, he was assassinated. And then there was all the Chappaquiddick stuff about Ted Kennedy. So, right. And then RFK was. So it's just this sort of black hole in my mind. I don't really have a lot of information, just shards of it. So I'm so happy we're going to like pull it together today.
So here's another question. Are you familiar with the phrase, the Kennedy curse?
Yes.
Yes.
And it certainly seems as though there is one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what the through line in my research, and guys, I've read so many books. Still finishing one that's just strictly a biography of JFK Jr. It's a good one. It's a good book. But what the primary thing, and I suppose you can call it a curse, but it's really generational trauma. And there have been a lot of, there's this way of looking at JFK Jr. that I see. It's this, you've got the people that think that that he was perfect, that he was great, that he was awesome, that he was all of these things. And then other people that are like, he was stupid, he was an oaf, he was a narcissist, he killed Carolyn and her sister Lauren in that plane. He had a death wish. He had all of this. And of course, it's a little more complicated than that because he was a very complicated man. We are all complicated people. And Carolyn was an incredibly complicated woman who did a lot of shitty, bad things. JFK Jr. did a lot of shitty, bad things. We've all done a lot of shitty, bad things that, thank goodness, we are not super famous public figures that have it just all over the papers.
Yeah. Thank God we didn't have the internet when we were teens.
Oh, yeah.
Or in our 20s. Yeah.
Or even just honestly, like I think about Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and if Twitter existed when she was around, it would have been even worse for her because she really she suffered with the paparazzi, and they were not nice to her. And this was before.
I didn't understand that. I never understood that. It was very strange to me.
It's kind of hard when America's son / the sexiest man alive and the world's most eligible bachelor is suddenly married. There's a lot of people not happy about that, and a lot of people that expected him to end up married to Daryl Hannah or, someone like that. And instead, he marries this not famous, not public figure that, people wanted her to be more beautiful or thought she wasn't good enough for him or thought she was a bitch because she just would avoid, there's very few instances where you hear the sound of her voice. Wow. It's because she just wouldn't do interviews. She wouldn't speak to anybody. She just was not comfortable with that level of attention. So I think that's why they would try to just get a reaction from her, because obviously a strong reaction photo is going to sell more than just a picture of her looking away. And so they would call her ugly. They would call her a whore. They would call her a bitch.
Ugh.
They were incredibly verbally abusive towards her, and not at all with John, as he was known as a baby. They loved him, but he had only ever known from the time he was born, he was surrounded by paparazzi, or he was surrounded by press. He grew up with the press. He didn't know any different. So, that was a big conflict in his relationship, is he didn't understand. He's just like, what's the big deal? You just have to relax. And she's like, what are you talking about? They don't call you names. But that is one of the fascinating things about JFK Jr. is he is a person who only ever knew life in the public eye. That's all he knew. And that's such an interesting kind of thing, because most people, even most celebrities, there's a time before and a time after. And he only ever knew life in the public eye, one, and two, he endured the murder of his father and his father figure, both assassinated. And he also grew up with Secret Service always around him until he was about 16 years old. The Secret Service was everywhere he was. So he was out cavorting with his friends going through Central Park. Some of his friends would talk about just noticing at a distance their Secret Service right there every step of the way. And what a strange life to grow up, and a life of great privilege. I mean, this was a kid who would go spend summers on his stepfather's private Greek island.
I know.
It's something I can't conceive of, right? Exorbitant wealth, just with Ari Onassis. all this fame, uh, going into places and seeing your father's portrait hanging on a wall. And also this image of you as a little child saluting your dead father, just following you your entire life. And this expectation that's put on you from not only your own family, but the entire public, the
Oh
entire
yeah.
world.
It is like being royalty.
Yes. I mean, it really was. It was, the Kennedys are our version of a royal family. But so JFK Jr., I'll just pick up from there. He was born November 25th, 1960. And from the time he was a baby, he didn't spend a heck of a whole lot of time with his dad. He didn't actually spend a whole lot of time with his mother either. He spent most of his time with a nanny. He and his older sister Caroline were. Caroline was always a little more demure, and JFK Jr. I'll just call him John because his dad is known as Jack. John was a incredibly energetic, very precocious, clever, funny little boy. And he loved the sound of helicopters. He loved seeing airplanes and helicopters and all that kind of stuff. So he would get excited when his father would return to the White House via helicopter, and he would want to run out and watch it land and see his dad come off the helicopter. And he didn't understand when his father passed. He didn't understand the finality of death. And when he was told that his father had died, he heard it, kind of nodded, and then later on would ask when his dad was coming back because he didn't understand it. He had been practicing saluting for a long time because he would see saluting happening, and so he had mastered his little salute by the time he was told by his mother to salute his father's casket. So while he didn't have any memory of his father, he did understand when Bobby Kennedy was killed. He understood that because he was around 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And so he had vivid memories of Bobby. And Bobby's probably, I would say, like, my favorite Kennedy. He had a chance to kind of learn after his brother died how to carry himself, if you know what I mean. And we'll get into all of the exploits of the Kennedy men and the sleaziness. But Bobby really fucking showed up for his sister-in-law and her kids, and he understood that he needed to be there for his nephew especially, because Jackie really wanted good male role models for her son. And so Bobby would come over for dinner. He would play with the kids, and Jackie was, of course, very concerned about their safety and protection. So she just really, after Bobby died, that was it for her. Like, she was like, some people theorize that she married Ari Onassis because he was so fucking wealthy. I mean, a billionaire, so fucking wealthy that she could be assured of absolute protection. Like, to be able to take her children to an island where assassins aren't going to be able to get to her or her kids. But she was like, oh, they're fucking killing Kennedys. I mean, you've got Jack was assassinated and then Bobby shortly thereafter. So John understood that his uncle was dead. And there's this moment where he's at a birthday celebration, like sometime after. He was about 8, 9 years old at this birthday celebration, and there were photographers outside and they were taking pictures. So there was like flash bulbs going off, and the sound of like the shutter of the cameras. And he started to freak out because he thought people were shooting. And that's trauma, you know? And then, so, he loses his father, he loses his uncle. And then Aristotle was really good to him for a period of time until the relationship between he and Jackie ended. And then Aristotle just like cut John off. It was like, okay, you're dead to me, So that was traumatic also. So every father in his life essentially just left him, either by being killed or just kind of wanting to wash their hands of the whole situation.
Mm.
Aristotle wasn't an easy person for Jackie to be married to. And then Christina, Aristotle Onassis's daughter, didn't like Jackie very much. And that's a whole separate discussion also when we get into Jackie and Jack Kennedy. But moving on with John, he was described as very immature. He was a very immature kid, inquisitive, willful, athletic, easily distractible. I'm not surprised, really, but he was pretty described as pretty childish and a gawky kid, kind of gawky, skinny, acne braces, and then he blossomed. Right, he blossomed. Then all of a sudden,
Mm.
he gets to high school, and that shift happens. I think probably around the time he was 16, 17 years old. And Christina Haig, who was his girlfriend for a long period of time, she had gone to Brown with him and was his housemate during that time. They were just friends during that time. But before then, she ran with his crowd in Manhattan. He was at the school called Collegiate. I forgot where she was, but all the kids from Dalton, all like the elite Manhattan schools, they all kind of ran together and they would like hang out together. And it was then that that some of his friends would talk about seeing the Secret Service. And then of course John would try to play tricks on the Secret Service. Like he would pretend he's doing one thing and then run off somewhere else. So they're like completely fucking stressed out, like trying to find him and all that. But it was just kind of understood if you're hanging out with John that you're going to have like security detail following you from a distance. But so he was a good friend. He was funny, a loyal friend, by all accounts. Jackie had him transferred to Phillips Andover, and he actually had to repeat a year before graduating because he was not a strong student. And this is where his reputation for being a doofus or a buffoon come from. But when you see his behavior and later on, you understand that it really looks like he had and I hesitate to throw around ADHD, but he legitimately would forget everything. He would lose things, forget things. And it could be a holdover from just having a fucking traumatic childhood and growing up like constantly followed by people. And imagine just always knowing that people are looking at you.
Ugh.
You know what I mean? Like you think
It's my
about
worst
that.
nightmare.
And I understand that he knew nothing else, but still the reality, it's like a Black Mirror episode. And there's some interesting things in his behavior moving forward that really indicate this fucking strange world that he inhabited.
Mm-hmm.
So it really took off when he became handsome. That's when shit really blew up. When you see the pictures of him graduating high school and stuff, and he's got this hair that has like a life of its own, and this fucking chiseled face. He looks like Michelangelo's David, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just absolute, like you just look at him and he's almost too pretty. He's too perfect. And so that's when shit really took off, when he and I'm sure he noticed it. It's like all of a sudden there's this new interest in him.
It was all of a sudden because we saw the tabloids. I remember the explosion. Yeah.
So here's the other consequence of being part of like America's royal family. So John was an incredibly average student. He did well. Where his best subjects were things like history and English, and his worst subjects were math and science. And so his math, for him to graduate from Phillips Andover, he was going to need to repeat a year to get all of those credits together. And because he's a legacy, he was still going to be assured probably a spot at Harvard. Because his father went there, like everybody fucking went there. His grandfather went there. But he wanted to go to Brown. And so Jackie had reached out to, I forgot who it was, just sort of asking, like, is it okay if he doesn't go to Harvard? He wants to go to Brown. And they're like, Brown is a perfectly fine school. And at the time, and I know that I already talked to you about this, Brown was considered a second-rate Ivy. And Brown, when they learned that John F. Kennedy Jr. was applying to their school, they were willing to overlook his grades. And like, let's be honest, if you flunk a year, are you really going to get into an Ivy unless you're a fucking Kennedy, right? So they were looking at what he could bring the school, and they made a very smart decision in admitting him, because once he was a student at Brown, so many celebrity children were applying to Brown. And then of course the money that comes with like donations and things like that. So it was a smart move on their part to admit John. Jackie was in the habit of sending John to different places to make sure that he was humble. She was wonderful, honestly. She was very much, she wasn't a WASP because she was a Catholic, but she certainly had those qualities of just being a bit removed, but still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was important to her that John not be a spoiled brat and lazy and entitled. So she would send him on these trips as enrichment activities and to give him a sense of the world. So she sent him to Guatemala to help after the earthquake, to help rebuild. Sent him to Kenya. Sent him to do like Outward Bound, these survivalist courses and things like that, which I think served him well. And you see it later in his life. He really truly had an interest in humanitarian issues. And, he had the background to support it. I mean, he would physically go out there. He was never too prissy for things. Like, he would do whatever it is that he had to do. But so he spent a year doing volunteer work and then attended Brown. And at Brown, he just would like forget to turn in papers. He would always lose his keys and end up having to crawl into somebody's fucking window at the house that he shared. Like, he'd like crawl, like Christina Haig before they were dating. He'd be like knocking at her window and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, I forgot, I can't find my keys. And he's like crawling in her window. He would borrow things from people and then never return them. He always needed to borrow money and like never pay it back because he just didn't have cash on him. He was a slob. When he was in the dorms, he like decided to adopt a pig and like it shit everywhere. And then his roommate was like, dude, absolutely not. So he had to like drive the pig back to the farm or whatever. Yeah, he was a train wreck. The thing was, he was, you forgave him because he was a good guy. Like, he was just that guy, the dude that you just kind of shook your head at, but he would fucking be there for you. Like, he would be there for you if you needed something. And there was this interesting moment. So the author of the last book, I think his name is Stephen Gillen, I think. But he was his tutor, or not his tutor, his TA at Brown for a history course. And they ended up becoming friends. And so they went into Rhode Island to watch like this boxing match at this bar, this on the TV, I think. And that was the thing too, is like all the kids from Brown, like the rich kids, they're not schlepping into Rhode Island to do anything. But John didn't. He wasn't classist. He wasn't a shithead that way. He'd seen enough of the world and understood. He understood he was privileged, right? So he goes to this bar, and this dude comes up, and he's described as being like this sort of Danny DeVito lookalike, like this little short guy. And he comes up, and well, first of all, when they get into the bar, Steve and his friend, John's friend, they both like walk into the bar. They look on the wall, and there's a framed picture of John F. Kennedy and a framed picture of Jesus. These are the two framed photos on the wall. And so Steve is kind of like looking at John, and John's like used to it at that point. So he doesn't say anything about it. And they're watching the fight, and this Danny DeVito lookalike comes up, and he's like, "It's you. I can't believe it. Your father was a great man." And he like hugs the guy. John hugs him and stuff. And then they figure out quickly he owns the bar. Right. And then the guy like leaves. And then later on, he comes back with his wife, and he's like, "I want you to meet my good friend, John F. Kennedy Jr." And then John shakes her hand, and he's like, "I've heard so much about you. It's wonderful to finally meet you," all that kind of stuff. And then the guy, the owner of the bar, and his wife leave. And then later on, Stephen looks at John, and he's like, "Why did you say that? Like you didn't know him, did you?" And John's like, "No, I didn't. But look, I figured out that he owns the bar, and I figured out that he probably told his wife that he knew my family. So I went along with it because that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted to hear. I figured that's what he would want me to say." And so Stephen puts it together. He's like, politics is in his DNA. Politics was in his DNA. And this is where, like, when he's criticized for being a doofus or an oaf, I love Maureen Callahan, but she fucking just rakes him over the coals every chance she gets. He's an idiot. He's stupid. He's vain. He's blah, blah, all these things. And I'm like, he may not have been book smart, but he was able to intuit people, and he understood how to talk to people. His emotional intelligence was off the charts. And so in that moment, it's like he could have been a snob. He could have been irritated. He could have been like, "Leave me the fuck alone. I just want to watch this fight." But
he could have Chapel Rowaned them.
Exactly. He could have acted like Chapel Rowan. He could have been like, "Boundaries, boundaries. Why are you touching me?" Yeah. So he was like, he was all right. You know what I mean? He did some terrible things too. We'll get into that. But it was in college. He was really coming together as someone that understood people, understood regular people, and was incredibly, his charisma really, really came through during his time at Brown. So this is probably a good time for us to take a break. Okay, so we were just talking about JFK Jr., John, which is funny. As an adult, when people would go, John, he'd go, "One John will suffice."
Really?
Yeah.
That's great. Just John.
One John will suffice. No need for two. So he ended his 4 years at Brown, barely.
By the skin of his teeth.
There was one class that he took, which was an incredibly, incredibly hard class. And he would need to pass it to be able to graduate. He didn't have to take this class, but he chose to take it, which is crazy. He really, and I think this speaks to what ended up happening, unfortunately, but he always got his way. He always
Mm-hmm.
survived. He
Mm-hmm.
had almost died a few times, always made it out alive. Everything either by sheer force of will or luck or because of his name, he
Mm-hmm.
always did okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose he wanted to take the class. It was a history course,
Hmm.
or a political history course. I can't remember. There were a few classes he took. One was on the Vietnam War, which the professor didn't give two fucks that Kennedy's son was in his class. He was going to be critical of John F. Kennedy, and the Vietnam War, and John didn't. He understood. Like he was able to kind of, again, his father was more of an idea than anything
Mm-hmm.
else to him, because he didn't have a memory of his father, but he took the course because it was interesting, and
Mm-hmm.
then somehow barely passed. So he spent time in India, and he didn't spend time in India as a tourist. Like he was like living with people and having all these different experiences. His mother loved India, and he really wanted to learn. And he was incredibly inquisitive. Like
Mm-hmm.
he asked questions, he traveled, he learned things. And then he decided to go to law school. And so he went to NYU. He didn't get into Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where else he applied. I don't know if he applied to Columbia or Yale or anything, but he did get into NYU. So that is where he went. And famously, he failed the bar exam twice. And the newspaper headlines were the hunk flunks. So
Mm-hmm.
there was all this pressure on him to, what was going to happen. And I can't imagine him in law school, actually. Like when I've spoken to people who went to law school, I'm like trying to imagine him getting through law school with the classes that are like especially dry. You
Ugh,
know what I mean? And the
yeah.
amount of memorization that's required.
And concentration, and yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense that, like, if he did have ADHD, it makes sense he would do things like travel and seek novelty. And, like, I wonder if he was, how invested he really even was in school, or like if it aligned with his, like, vision for himself at all. Or, like, do you even have a vision for yourself if you grow up in that way and you have
He
all these
didn't.
expectations?
He was starting to. He was starting to. And you see it towards the end of his life, and even with George magazine, which he began. I think he was trying to understand. I think it was a given. I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
Jackie would have allowed him to not attend college. And I think that also it was in him, like, it's what you did. I don't think he
Yeah.
ever considered not going to college. And then law school, I think, was something that probably was of interest to him in a way,
Mm-hmm.
just like a lot of these things were. I think he took these history courses at Brown because he was interested, and then would probably lose focus partway through.
Mm-hmm.
He was described as being, he was a visionary like his father, and he had a lot of ideas, and he was ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, especially with his idea for George magazine, and what that was, which was supposed to be this intersection of culture and politics,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time didn't exist. Nothing like that
Mm-hmm.
existed, and people didn't understand, like, culture and politics combined. And it's like, that's where we are now. We are all culture and politics. Like, George would be very relevant to now, especially if it was working to be unbiased.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this great quote. Let me find it. Dr. Gluck was the professor that, like, if he didn't pass her class, he was not going to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And she said he never had enough patience to sit down and do the work. She reflected. He liked ideas. He was interested, but not that good at exploring complex concepts. He was not a scholar by temperament, but he was an observer of culture and history. John had the social skills and intellectual skills, but he lacked the technical skills to excel.
Mm-hmm.
Someone like that really just needs a team. to organize his ideas and implement them. Like he can come up with them, but what he needed was a team to put things forth. And I think that's where he was finding his footing at George Magazine around the time that he died. So during this time, he had his girlfriend, Christina Haig, for a while, and she nearly died with him. He was into kayaking. He loved the outdoors and he loved sports. And he had taken her kayaking when they were on vacation in, I believe it was Bermuda. And he wanted to go out in the kayak, and he wanted to go further because he's like, oh, everything looks great. Let's go further. She had an injury on her foot that she needed to be mindful of. So she needed to be careful in the kayak. And he pushed it. And anyway, long story short, they nearly die. And they're being thrown about like the everything changed. The swells, like waves were crashing over them. They managed to, and this was really lucky. They managed to get carried by a wave over this fucking boulder and make it to land, to the sand. Had that not happened, they probably would have crashed into it and died, right? And so they get to the sand, and apparently John was pacing around talking to himself. Christina said that he was like he said he was saying something like he referred to Jackie Kennedy, his mother, as Mummy. He referred to her as Mummy, and he was saying something like, can't tell Mummy, can't tell Mummy, can't tell Mummy, like just repeating it, like she couldn't know this. Anyway, it was a situation where once they were safely, I think they had to get back in the fucking kayak and get back to where they were staying. Anyway, they survived it. But Christina was like, dude, we almost fucking died. And then his response was like, yeah, but what a way to go.
Yeesh.
And yeah. So he's clearly an adrenaline junkie, right? And I feel like moments like that, like flying his plane, being in a kayak in a high danger situation, climbing Mount Rainier, where like the guide who was like the expert was like, guys, we got to turn back. And John was like, are you fucking kidding? I didn't come here to not climb that mountain. And the guy's like, yo, you're the novice. I'm the experienced person. We're going down. So there's a girl in the industry who was very vocal with me about like her mental health struggles. Like she struggled quite a bit with mental health. She was also one of the greatest performers I had ever directed in any scene. She was amazing, but she dealt with a lot, and she was on a lot of different types of medication. She was just incredibly just forthcoming about a lot of things. And she just would talk openly about it. She's like, oh yeah, I do this, I do that. I've tried these different things. It's and she explained to me that when she was in the middle of like a really intense, aggressive sex scene, it focused, it centered her mind. It allowed her to just shut all of the other things out and just be right in the moment. It was a break for her. So something that would be uncomfortable for most people, because she did some pretty aggressive scenes that could probably scare some people to see like some of the things she had done. But in those types of scenes, it was a break for her mind. Yeah. So you could say that that the danger, right, even though it was a controlled environment, made her feel okay. And I wonder if for John, doing things, pushing himself like that, and then unfortunately, whoever was stuck with him in that moment, it was like a break for him from his brain.
Well, it's like, I mean, I think about anybody with a trauma history. And I was thinking about this too in terms of people who live in chaos
Yeah.
and make more chaos. It's coherent in a way. Like, I remember when COVID hit, everybody was freaking out, and I was like, okay. I felt more calm because, my anxiety, or I'm always expecting danger anyway. It's like when
Right.
I was talking to Joanne, my consultant, and she has a lot of friends in Israel right now. And she's like, when the bombs hit, they feel relief because they're waiting for the bomb to drop. And so once they hit, it's like relieving. It's, they knew it happened. It already happened. It's so, I think I can see that with danger, and also, yeah, that it does focus the mind.
Right.
But if you're in a state of like hyper arousal most of the time, there is a settling.
So Christina was his girlfriend for the good length of time. He thought he'd marry her. He described her as the woman he was going to marry. That did not happen, obviously. He had a habit of overlapping relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So he started seeing Daryl Hannah and was featured all the time in the tabloids with his shirt off. You Google his name, you will see pictures of the perfect specimen that was JFK Jr. And he was voted sexiest man alive by People magazine. Interestingly, if he wasn't in the news for a while, he would just take his shirt off in Central Park and play frisbee or football or whatever with his friends. So it was interesting. It's not that he was seeking out attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's just if there wasn't attention, it was a little unnerving, which again goes to show he knew nothing else but press.
That's the interesting thing. It's so like, that's the coherence, predictability thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's something so it's like people who thrive on chaos. We look at that and we're like, why? Why would they get another cat? Why would they have
Right.
another baby? Why would they, what I mean? Like, but it's, to them, it's what's familiar. And so when it's gone, when things are calm or things are whatever, like, I can imagine he's like, what do I do with myself? When the cameras aren't there, when people are not photographing me or looking at me, it probably felt like distressing or something on some level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in a weird way, like he had such a good relationship with the press.
Mm-hmm.
He had a great relationship with them. He always gave them a little bit, and they were respectful. And again, I think this goes to the recognition, the memory of him as America's son.
Mm-hmm.
That he was always going to be the little boy saluting his father's casket, and that's just cemented in like our collective consciousness, or those of us from a certain generation. Obviously I was not born yet when Kennedy died, but that image is it's an iconic image, just like
Yeah.
that horrible image of the little girl with the naked little girl running.
Yes. Oh,
Wait, it's not, was it napalm? What was it? She survived. I know that. I can't remember, but it's that famous Life magazine image. Then you've got the image of John saluting his dead father. There's so many kind of images that you didn't even need to be there. You recognized it. And so there was a fondness for him and a desire to see him succeed, and an
yes.
expectation. He had big shoes to fill. There was an expectation that he would go into politics, and he was aware of that, and that was the shift that was starting to happen later on. So him dating, his dating life, of course, was of great interest, and everybody, so many women and girls were just in love with him. So he was dating Daryl Hannah, and that was a chaotic relationship, as you would imagine. I mean, they were like night and day in so many ways. Like, he's from this East Coast kind, the Martha's Vineyard, pearls, Chanel type world, and she was this kind of hippie chick, kind of wacky,
Venice,
crystals,
California.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, actress, prone to kind of getting up in arms about stuff that he just found to be really trivial and incidental. And he was linked to a lot of different famous people, Madonna, Sarah Jessica Parker for a period of time. There was this another woman, Katie, can't remember her last name, but she was kind of like the in-betweener, kind of in between different people. And Carolyn, Carolyn, he ended up meeting, crossing paths with her at an event, and then later on made his way into Calvin Klein to get fitted for a suit. But what a lot of people don't know is that that was a kind of on again, off again thing in the beginning as well. And so
Mm.
Carolyn was just a very ordinary young woman. I mean, not ordinary in a bad way, but just she came from. Uh, she had older twin sisters,
Mm.
Lauren and Lisa,
Mm.
and her mother, Anne Freeman, who just honestly just seems like a really cool lady, just a cool woman. But Carolyn's their father had kind of walked out on them when Carolyn was a little girl, and they were in White Plains, New York. And was just trying to work and make ends meet, and then eventually ended up marrying an orthopedic surgeon, I believe, and then they ended up moving to, like, you know,
Uptown.
yeah, things radically changed for them financially. But Carolyn was like a solidly, middle class young woman from, a child of divorce, who was also kind of your average student. She was just an average student. She was I find her really I beautiful. Some people don't agree, which I understand. I understand. She had very, her features were unique. I just thought she looked like a Botticelli painting, her face. But I just found her to just be so striking. And one of the things I notice with JFK Jr. is the women that he would be in long-term relationships with tended to be not conventionally beautiful, not counting Daryl Hannah.
Mhm.
But like Christina Haig, not conventionally beautiful. The Katie, I feel so bad. Cannot remember her last name. I keep wanting to call her Katie Miller, but that's somebody I went to middle school with. But also kind of not conventionally beautiful. Carolyn was not conventionally beautiful. But yeah, so the introduction of John to Carolyn. Around this time he was working as a district attorney. He finally passed the bar on the third try, and there's some funny footage of him. You can go and look at these funny interactions with John on YouTube, but he's like just walking and he goes, "Yep, I know. I got one more try," or whatever. Like, he had a good sense of humor about himself. He was a self-deprecating dude. There's jokes about him presiding over a case that, of course, he was going to win. It was
Mhm.
where a burglar fell asleep and the police apprehended him. So he won that case. So it's not like he was getting any hardball cases for whatever reason. Maybe because he was, JFK Jr. Maybe because he got lucky. But he wanted to venture into something new. He wanted to go into business with this gentleman, Michael Berman, who was a solid business guy. And they tossed around a couple of ideas that were not that great. like build your like stuff with a kayak because he loved kayaking, something with kayaking. No, that wasn't going to work. Something else, and then they landed on a magazine, and the magazine would end up to be George after George Washington, and the idea was that it would be this intersection of culture and politics. And this, of course, was happening at a time when things were just going pretty well in the 90s. Honestly, the decade of the 90s was a really great decade. We had Clinton in the White House. This was during the time of the dot-com boom. The economy was doing well. I'm not saying everything was perfect. I mean, lots of shitty things happened, like Rodney King, like O.J. Simpson, like all, the Oklahoma City bombing. So I'm not saying everything was fucking great, but just generally for the country, there was this optimism, and I certainly was feeling it. The 90s was a lot of fun, but JFK Jr. was seeing an opportunity for people to learn also, maybe people that were not heavy into politics that, were going to be put off by something like the National Review, or I forgot, like there's like just a few other like political magazines. And he wanted to create something that was entertaining, but would also, you could kind of learn about politics in a more palatable way and in a more fun way, which honestly, I don't think was a terrible idea.
No, I mean, to be a more informed, engaged citizen. But it would be like classy and cool, and like, did it have things like fashion as part of it, or was it?
So did you ever see? So I remember when George hit the stands. I remember him on the news going, "Ladies and gentlemen, meet George," and he pulls the curtain down, and it's the cover of the very first issue, and it's Cindy Crawford dressed as George Washington. The photo was by Herb Ritts.
Wow.
And it's a beautiful cover. But I mean, the magazine struggled. It was trying to find its footing, but it also, fortunately and unfortunately, obviously, a magazine started by the fucking America's Prince, right, with Cindy Crawford on the cover, is going to sell out the first issue. Subsequent issues really struggled, and it was trying to find its footing. There were people that would turn down doing interviews because they were really unsure. Like the Clintons declined interviews. Hillary Clinton declined to do an interview. Bill declined to do an interview. There were people that were just not. They weren't confident in what George was, and George was trying to find its identity. And it's interesting because George was trying to find its identity, and JFK Jr. was trying to find his identity. And so it's this interesting parallel. He had so much faith and so much belief, and there was so much he wanted for the magazine, but he was trying to figure it out. And at the same time, he's trying to figure out, like, who am I? What is my destiny? What am I doing? Everyone wants something from me. And the problem is he was not a confrontational guy. He wanted to be everything to everybody. And so he was like really trying to figure himself out. But I think that's a good place to stop for today. And we'll continue on with George and Carolyn, and just continue on, unpacking the Kennedy curse / the Kennedy generational trauma and how it passed down. We'll see how it passed down to John Jr. And then we'll move our way up through Ted and Bobby and Jack and Joe.
Very exciting. Wow. I feel like you're fleshing out all of these, like, it's nice to connect the dots, for me, is because I've had this vague idea, of like, he kind of popped onto the scene and then he died, like that's how I felt. It was like he came onto the scene and then all of a sudden he died. And like, I never really, and it's such it's interesting because we both have been talking about how we're nostalgic for the 90s right now. Like, I'm so nostalgic. I didn't even love the 90s when I was in the 90s. Like,
I love it now. I wish I could be me now. I think I said this to you. I wish I could be me now, in like, just drop me down in 1996. Like, just
Yeah.
drop me on down. But here's the thing that's so interesting too, because John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette and her sister Lauren all died July 16th of 1999, and we'll get into the details of that day later. But that's the day that he died. And so it was like 1999. So like going into the end of 1999. And
Wow.
I was like driving home today after dropping the kids off, and I was thinking about how, remember in Boogie Nights when William H. Macy, he plays Little Bill in the movie. And
Mm-hmm.
remember, like it's that party, that the New Year's Eve party going into
Yeah.
1980. And you see him and he walks into a room and he sees his wife, played by Nina Hartley, and she's fucking another dude. And he doesn't say anything. He shuts the door and you see him and he walks out to his car and he grabs a gun and he goes back in, and he shoots her and the guy. And then he comes out and he looks at everybody and he shoots himself. And then that's the end of 1979. I feel like in this interesting way, if we look at
Mm.
JFK Jr. and we look at the optimism, we look at the potential, we look at the hope, we
Yes.
look at what
Ugh.
the vision and what could have been, he died right as we were moving into 2000. So we were getting out of the
Right.
90s, and like his death, because so many people pinned their hopes and dreams on him, and when he died, he took all that with him. And then we
Yes.
sort of ventured unmoored into a whole new period of time, because
The
after
Iraq
9/11,
War.
yeah,
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
was ever the same again.
No.
And I remember
Wow.
that, like, I'm like, nothing will ever be the same again after after 9/11. But just prior to that, like, he died, and then just I remember the shift, just just there was a cultural shift moving out of the 90s.
Definitely. Oh, I remember being in class. I mean, I remember obviously 9/11, but I remember being in class. I had just started graduate school like in 2001, and we were going to war. And it's interesting for me when I think of just that whole legacy of their family and the generational timing of things, how I would hear my parents talk and my friends' parents talk about where they were when they found out that Kennedy had been assassinated and the impact it had on them. And even though I wasn't like closely following John F. Kennedy Jr., there was a sense of loss. Like, oh my God, like our generation lost its thing. It's royalty essentially. And it was like it felt potent, even though I was not really tracking it. Like a major loss.
I was working at Mitchell Brothers during that
Mm-hmm.
time after they found the bodies, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
that I was in the green door room at Mitchell Brothers, and I was partnered with this girl. Her stage name was Ginger. Her stage name was Ginger.
Like
And
my
we were
puppy.
exactly. And we were just sitting on the table. It was one of those, it was like a Sunday night or something at the club. So it was like very quiet, and we're just sitting on the table talking, and she was like grieving the death of JFK Jr. She was like, he was my ideal. Like, she was talking about it. And I was more, I think, attached to Carolyn, because I remember
Mm-hmm.
when Carolyn married him
Mm-hmm.
in 96. And I remember like seeing magazine articles about her, and she seemed very mysterious, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being more focused on her, because I was like, wow, just to be a regular person and marrying this guy, like, what's that like?
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like Diana.
yeah, and she looked, she always looked uncomfortable in pictures. If she knew the camera was on her, she was like kind of like just trying to walk her dog, just trying to do this, and everybody's talking about what she's wearing and her hair and all this.
Ugh.
And so I remember just sort of like thinking, because for me, like, JFK Jr. was always beautiful. I mean, I was like, oh, duh, of course, it's JFK Jr. He's so handsome. But he was almost like not real.
I'm looking
Whereas
him up right
she
now.
was real. She was like a real cool downtown chick. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a girl I would have gone to school with. That's a girl I would have looked up to.
Yeah.
Her clothes are so amazing. She's so stylish. Wow, it's so cool. She worked in fashion, like all of that. I was more into her. And so when I remember when the plane was missing, I'm like, no, they can't be dead. Like they can't be dead. Like I was like, they're gonna find them holding on to like a cushion, or they're gonna have life preserve things on in the water. They can't be dead. And then they were. And
Ugh.
so I just remember I was fixated on her. I was fixated on the fact that she must have been really scared. Her poor fucking sister, their poor
Oh my
fucking
God,
mother.
that poor family.
Oh
That's
my
just-
gosh. Yeah. A sister lost her twin and her younger sister, and then this woman lost two of her 3 daughters. Like in this senseless way. It didn't have to. And the truth is, it never had to happen. He should not have been flying. We'll get into that. But yeah, that was such a crazy time. And it was the end of a really fucking amazing decade.
And then we had then we were like Y2K.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
right, just like, it really was. It was the end of something. Just say no to flying in a tiny plane with someone.
Yeah. Just say no to Piper Saratogas. Just say no to pilots who have no instrument rating. Also, I personally, little planes, regular like commercial airlines, yes, that's fine. Little fucking airplanes, fuck that shit.
Mm-mm.
All right, gang. We will see you next time.
Adios.
Yes.
Muchachos.
Goodbye.
Hey, I'm Dan Harris, host of the 10% Happier podcast. With summer winding down, now is the perfect time to hit the reset button. So many of us get stuck in ruts at work, in our relationships, in our nervous system. We've got a special series where I'm going to be talking to psychologists, meditation teachers, even some comedians about how to get out of that rut, how to reset your life in lots of different super practical ways. 10% Happier with Dan Harris. Join the party wherever you get your podcasts.